I was the guy everyone brought into the room when things were already on fire, but somehow never the guy they promoted when it was time to hand out titles. You know that person? The one who trains the new managers, calms the client, fixes the forecast, and then watches someone else get their picture on the slide. That was me, for 7 years. So when I tell you my company skipped my promotion, and then my CEO started blowing up my phone after my $100 million data center deal hit the news, understand this. None of it was an accident. They made their choices. I just stopped pretending I didn't see them. The day it really started was a Tuesday in March, 9:02 a.m., all hands call. I'd been half pretending to read emails while waiting for the org updates section to start. My manager, Paul, had been hinting for months that this will be your year. I'd hit my number 4 years straight, eaten 2 failed implementations that weren't even my fault, and was leading what everyone called the once-in-a-decade opportunity. A multi-year, 9-figure data center program for a Fortune 100 retailer. Director of Strategic Accounts. That was the title. Not glamorous to most people, but in our world it meant bigger deals, more autonomy, a seat in the rooms where decisions actually got made. It also meant I could finally stop having 23-year-old sales ops partners explain my own accounts back to me using dashboards I built. The Zoom grid filled up, little faces, some camera on, some black squares with initials. The CEO did his usual hope everyone's staying healthy spiel. The HR VP smiled too much, and I sat there, pretending not to care as the slide deck advanced. Today, the CEO said, we're excited to share some key leadership promotions. My heart rate ticked up. My calendar already had a one-on-one with Paul for 11:30 titled Next Steps, which was the least subtle hint he'd ever dropped. I minimized it so I wouldn't stare. The slide changed. 3 boxes, 3 names, 3 photos. The first promotion was someone in APAC I barely knew. The second was a finance director moving up. And the third, my eyes went straight to the bottom right corner, was the one that mattered. Please join me in congratulating Eric Dalton, the CEO said, our new director of strategic accounts. I didn't hear the rest of the sentence. Eric's headshot was plastered on the slide with a list of bullet points underneath. MBA, fast-tracked high potential, key contributor on strategic wins. I'd trained him 18 months earlier. He'd shadowed my calls. I'd walked him through how data center power redundancy works on a whiteboard he never once cleaned afterward. My name wasn't on any slide. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was that strange, hollow clarity you get right after a car almost hits you in a crosswalk. I clicked to unmute, then stopped myself. In the participant list, I could see messages flying by. Congrats, Eric! Let's go! Well deserved. I typed, Congrats, Eric, into the chat, stared at it for a second, and hit enter. Professional. Always professional. When the all hands ended, my Slack pinged instantly. Paul, got a sec to debrief? I joined his call. He was already there, camera on, tie loosened in that I'm just like you guys way. Hey, he said, exhaling like this was hard on him. Look, I wanted to get to you right after the announcement, before the rumor mill. Sure, I said. My voice sounded normal. I hated how normal it sounded. He launched into it. So the calibration committee this cycle, it was tight. A lot of moving pieces. The sense was that you're absolutely operating at director level, no question. But we had to think about optics, coverage, all of that. Eric has the title for now, but... For now? I repeated. Yeah, he said quickly. Listen, we need you exactly where you are while the Northbridge deal is in flight. That account trusts you. If we move you up and out of the day-to-day right as we're closing a $100 million program, it could spook them. The idea is you land this. We go back off-cycle. We adjust title and comp. Okay? Everything in that speech was designed to sound reasonable if you didn't look too closely. I'd sat in on enough promotion committees to know the phrases. Calibration, optics, headcount constraints. It all meant the same thing. Someone else had a sponsor with more pull. So the plan, I said slowly, is I keep doing director-level work without director-level pay or title, because changing my email signature might confuse the client. Paul winced. Don't say it like that. You know it's more nuanced. Sure, I said. Nuanced. He leaned in a little, as if we were co-conspirators. Look, you're the linchpin on Northbridge. Everyone knows that. Eric's still learning the ropes. Help him stabilize in the role. Get this over the line. I'll make it right. I promise. I nodded because what else was I supposed to do? Hang up and rage quit? Send a company-wide email? That's not how you survive in corporate. You swallow it, you say, I appreciate the transparency, and you keep doing the job. But something shifted that day. Not in how I acted, at least not immediately. In how I paid attention. The Northbridge account didn't care about my title. They cared that when their VP of infrastructure called me at 10 p.m. because a test cluster had gone sideways, I answered. And I knew the difference between a breaker trip and a PDU fault without reading off a script. We'd been working together for over a year. They were consolidating 4 fragmented data centers into 2 new facilities. That meant power planning, cooling design, rack density, fiber routing, failover paths, the kind of work you don't fake your way through with buzzwords. I'd flown out to walk their existing sites, literally counted mislabeled cables, in a freezing cold aisle with their tech leads, and sat in their cafeteria, eating bad eggs, listening to their CTO rant about vendor lock-in. On paper, I was Senior Account Manager, Enterprise. In their phone, I was just Alex Data Center. A week after the promotion announcement, I was on a Zoom with their CTO, a guy named Ravi, who had the permanent under-eye circles of someone who'd been on call since 2003. We were reviewing the latest iteration of the design, dual-feed power, N+1 everything, staged capacity for their growth curve. He leaned back in his chair and said, You know, when this is all signed, our comms people are going to make a big song and dance about it. Biggest infrastructure investment we've made in a decade. They'll want to name names. Names? I echoed. Yeah. He shrugged. They like to quote the people who actually did the work. Our CIO, me, someone from your side. You, I assume. I laughed it off because that's what you do. Usually those things just say our partner and slap the logo on it. Then we'll change it, he said. The board knows you've been our constant here. No offense, but your execs swing in and out of these meetings like they're checking a box. I muted for a second to hide the smile I couldn't quite suppress. None taken, I said when I came back. After the call, I exported the whiteboard and dropped it into the project folder I kept meticulously organized. I'd always been like that. Version decks, call summaries, notes. That afternoon, I created a new folder inside it, a private one not shared with the team. I named it simply Evidence. Every deck I built, every email where I laid out strategy, every time someone higher up forwarded my message with, as per below, and their name on top. Every calendar invite where I was host and someone else walked into the room 5 minutes late to own the narrative. I wasn't plotting revenge. I told myself I was just protecting myself in case something went wrong with the deal and they needed a scapegoat. But later, when that 100-matter announcement went public and my phone lit up with messages from people who'd barely remembered my name, it was that folder I thought about because it turned out I hadn't just been documenting a project. I'd been documenting exactly how much my silence was worth. The first sign something was shifting came quietly. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a tiny detail in a meeting that should have meant nothing. We were on a standing Tuesday call with Northbridge's infrastructure leads, reviewing thermal load projections. Eric joined late, again, and immediately started talking over me, summarizing points I hadn't even made yet. He wasn't malicious. He just didn't know what he didn't know. He mixed up KW and KVA, skipped over their airflow constraints, and then with complete confidence told their engineering director, as we've discussed before, this is the architecture I've been guiding your team through. The director's face didn't change, But his eyes flicked to me in that way people do when they're checking whether you're actually the adult in the room. I stepped in, calmly corrected the numbers, clarified the power redundancy the right way, and pulled up the airflow mock-ups I'd made the night before. The call moved on, but something stuck with me. Eric had stopped trying to learn. He was trying to perform, and performances always need an audience. Inside the company, he got plenty of it. Within weeks, his fingerprints were suddenly on everything. Weekly reports to leadership started being sent from his email, with sections I recognized, word for word, because I'd written them. Decks I created showed up with formatting tweaks and his initials on the file. When I confronted him in the most diplomatic way possible, "Hey, can we align who sends what so messaging doesn't get messy?" He smiled like he was doing me a favor. "Dude, relax. The higher-ups want to see leadership from the director role. You'll get your shine later." My shine. As if I were some intern whose confidence needed managing. A few days later, I stumbled across a draft of our internal win announcement in marketing's shared folder. The document was unfinished but formatted enough to show the structure. CEO, quote. COO, quote. Director, quote. Client testimonial. I scrolled, scanning for my name the way you do when you're pretending not to keep score. Nothing. It wasn't rage that hit me. It was something quieter, colder, the kind of clarity that slips under your ribs without warning. I left the browser open just long enough to take a screenshot for the folder I'd started. Then I closed it, adjusted my headset, and joined another call to do the job I still cared about. Because here's the thing. The client never treated me like an accessory. When we walked through their existing East Coast facility, the one with the overloaded PDUs and the cursed floor tile that rattled if anyone exhaled too hard, their engineers didn't talk to Eric. They talked to me. They wanted my opinion on airflow, my reasoning on density planning, my math on overhead busway load, and the CTO, Ravi, kept calling me directly for anything that required actual understanding instead of leadership theater. But back at headquarters, reality twisted through the corporate kaleidoscope the way it always does. HR eventually reached out, just to check in, which is always a sign someone above them is worried an employee might detonate. It was a video call with a woman named Denise, who had perfected the soft HR voice that says absolutely nothing while sounding supportive. "I want to acknowledge the disappointment you may have felt with the org announcement," she said. "May have," I repeated. "Promotions at this level consider many factors," she continued. "Cross-functional exposure, visibility, leadership maturity. I lead the largest deal in company history." "Yes," she agreed brightly, "and everyone is grateful for that. But calibrations are influenced by broader considerations. The sense was that you're extremely valuable in your current role." Extremely valuable right where I was, meaning irreplaceable at the level beneath the one I earned. I didn't argue. People think career damage comes from yelling. It doesn't. It comes from choosing the wrong moment to appear emotional. So I stayed composed, thanked her, and afterward sat at my desk in silence long enough to hear the hum of the AC vent above me. I understood the game now. They wanted the outcome of my work without the cost of recognizing it. And as long as the deal wasn't signed, the leverage was theirs. But something else was shifting, just not where they were looking. One evening, while finalizing a risk register revision, I sent the updated deck to Northbridge's comms manager. Her reply came back within minutes. "Perfect, Alex. We'll incorporate this into our external materials. Also, our PR team will want to quote you directly for the announcement. Makes sense since you've been the consistent lead on our side." Consistent lead. Their side, not my company's. I sat back in my chair. There was nothing dramatic in her tone, nothing provocative. It was the casual certainty that struck me, as if it had always been obvious who the real architect of the project was. And that's when the irritation sharpened into something cleaner. Resolve. That night, I opened my private folder, Evidence, and added everything from the past week. Slides, email threads, meeting summaries, the internal PR draft with my absence highlighted in yellow. Notes about calls where Eric fumbled the details and I fixed them without ever taking the credit back. I wasn't planning to burn the place down. That's amateur hour thinking. I was doing what professionals do when they've been pushed into a corner they didn't choose. I was preparing options. 2 days later, during a steering committee review, something small but important happened. Eric began answering a question about failover design incorrectly. And before I could even open my mouth, the client CTO cut in. Let's have Alex walk us through that. He's been the technical anchor from day one. It wasn't said with malice toward Eric, just accuracy. I went through the solution calmly. Power path, isolation, cooling contingencies, workload migration windows. When I finished, Ravi nodded like someone settling into the truth. After the call, while logging the discussion notes, I paused for a moment, not to savor anything, just to acknowledge the shift. There are moments in corporate life when the story people are trying to write about you breaks against reality so hard it stops being sustainable. And that night, as I shut down my laptop, one thought settled in with quiet finality. I wasn't waiting for anyone to make it right anymore. I wasn't the grateful workhorse. I wasn't the stepping stone for someone else's career arc. If they wanted to pretend the deal was theirs, they should have thought about that before the people who actually mattered made it clear who they trusted. And I didn't know it yet. But the next decision they made, one tiny, predictable corporate decision, would cost them everything. The deal closed on a Thursday morning at 7:14 a.m. Eastern, not with champagne, not with applause, with a DocuSign alert popping up on my phone while I was half buttoning my shirt. Northbridge had signed all 3 master agreements, the primary build-out, the contingency expansion, and the 5-year operations contract. A full $100.4 million in total value, spread across phases that would keep our company busy and relevant for half a decade. I stood there for a moment, staring at the signature page. My own company didn't know yet. Eric and the exec team had been pushing to align messaging before any client announcements, which was corporate code for, we want to massage the story before the world hears it. But Northbridge didn't work on our timeline. At 7:23 a.m., I received a second email, this time from their communications director. Congrats, Alex. Our release goes live at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Attaching final copy. Thanks again for all your work. Everyone here knows this was your design from end to end. I opened the document. There it was. My full name, my job title, a direct quote about the joint approach to resilience design, and a paragraph describing me as the lead architect and primary account partner, responsible for the solution. I read it twice. Then a third time, slower. It wasn't just clear, it was indisputable and completely accurate. Our marketing team had approved their brand usage days earlier because no one bothered to read the attached draft. They assumed it would be the usual corporate fluff. They assumed wrong. I dropped the file into evidence, my folder, and drove to the office in a silence that felt almost electric. At 9 sharp, leadership hosted a win celebration Zoom. Exactly the kind of call where nothing of value is said, and 90% of the energy goes into pretending culture is strong. The CEO appeared, smiling, clapping, already half reading from a script on his second monitor. Eric was on camera too, bright smile, crisp shirt, the actual embodiment of corporate enthusiasm. I watched him congratulate the team, thank cross-functional partners, and talk about visionary execution. My name got a single brief mention. Of course, Alex supported throughout. Supported. Throughout? I muted myself so they wouldn't hear me laugh. After the call, Eric pinged me privately. Can you send me the consolidated design deck? CEO wants it for some board prep. I stared at that message long enough for the letters to blur slightly. Then I forwarded it, the exact deck I'd built, without comment. And still, none of that was the turning point. The turning point came the next morning. At 6:01 a.m. Eastern, Northbridge's press release went live. At 6:14 a.m., an industry publication posted a full feature about the deal, with my quote placed directly under the headline. At 6:21 a.m., the article hit LinkedIn, where people started tagging me. And at 6:33 a.m., my phone exploded, not figuratively, physically. It vibrated so hard on my kitchen counter that my coffee sloshed over the mug. The first call was from my manager, then Eric again, then the COO, then the CEO. 5 missed calls in 3 minutes. At 6:41 a.m., a text appeared from a number I didn't recognize at first, because I'd never interacted with it. CEO. Huge coverage this morning. Call me ASAP. I didn't. Not because I was playing games, because I had already scheduled a call at 8 with someone else. The VP from the competing data center operator who'd been quietly checking in with me for months. He had messaged me last night, before the article even dropped. Saw movement on your deal. If it closes and if your name's attached, I can get approval on the VP offer this week. Let's talk. When I joined that call at 8:00, he already had the article pulled up. His grin was impossible to hide. You understand what this means, right? He asked. You're not just a strong account manager anymore. You're the guy who landed one of the biggest private sector data center investments this year. Everyone in the industry knows your name now. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Everything felt strangely calm, like water settling after a storm. He outlined the offer. VP of Strategic Accounts, 7-figure annual quota with sane margins, a team of 3 direct reports, full autonomy to run the cloud and retail vertical, base salary and bonus more than double my current compensation. No non-compete issues, fully vetted by their legal team. By 8:27 a.m., I had the written offer in my inbox. At 9:00 a.m., I finally called my CEO back. He answered on the first ring. Alex, Jesus, I've been trying to reach you. I saw. We need to talk, right now. He pulled in the COO and my manager without asking. Eric must have tried to join too because I saw the notification and watched the CEO decline it. The call began with corporate panic disguised as praise. This article is impressive. You clearly had more visibility with the client than we realized. The narrative puts you at the center of the project, which isn't wrong, but it complicates internal messaging. Complicates internal messaging. That told me everything about their priorities. My manager looked like he wanted to sink into his chair. The COO had the face of a man rehearsing who he would blame if this blew up. The CEO leaned forward. Alex, level with me. Why weren't we told the client was planning to name you directly? They asked for a quote, I said. Marketing approved it. He blinked. Marketing approved. That quote? They approved the release, I clarified. The quote was in the release. The silence. The kind that means someone is realizing the consequences of their own shortcuts. Then he shifted tone. Look, this changes things. Dramatically. Your role, your compensation. All of it needs to be reevaluated. We should have promoted you earlier. That's on us. But we can fix it now. My heart didn't jump. My hands didn't shake. I felt steady. The way you feel when you finally stop hoping someone will treat you fairly. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. A director title, he said immediately. Retroactive pay adjustment, expanded team. We can put the new compensation package together today. I let that sit for a moment. They thought I wanted a title. They had no idea how far past that point I'd gone. Thank you, I said. I'll think about it. The CEO frowned. Think about it? Yes, I said. I have options. I'm considering them. My manager's eyes widened. The COO stopped breathing. And the CEO, the man who had never spoken to me directly until this moment, finally understood. They hadn't skipped a promotion. They'd created leverage, not for them, for me. I ended the call politely, and for the first time in 7 years, I realized something simple and devastating. They thought they owned my future because they owned my email signature. They were wrong, and by the time they understood how wrong, it would already be too late. I didn't resign that day. People think big decisions happen in a flash, like slamming a door or shouting, "I quit." That's TV logic. In real life, especially in corporate, you move with precision. You verify your contract, review your non-compete, check your obligations, close your loops one by one. So on Friday morning, instead of marching into HR, I scheduled a call with our in-house legal counsel. We walked through my agreements line by line. No non-solicit restrictions beyond 6 months. No IP conflicts. The designs belonged to the company, not me, and I had no intention of taking them. No non-compete that would block me from joining a competitor in a different region. Everything was clean. By noon, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The only leverage the company had ever counted on was my loyalty, and now it was gone. That afternoon, I requested a meeting with the CEO. When he joined the call, he looked less polished than usual. No blazer, collar slightly askew, the expression of a man who'd rehearsed 3 different speeches and didn't know which one to choose. "Alex," he started, "I want to revisit the package we proposed. We can go beyond director. We can consider a senior director track, equity, expanded scope, whatever it takes to show you're valued here. It would have worked 3 months earlier, but now it just sounded like retroactive damage control. I appreciate the offer," I said, "but the issue isn't the title." He exhaled heavily. "I know you're frustrated, but we're fixing it. You'll have visibility, support, a direct line to me." "It's not frustration," I said. "It's clarity." He went still. I explained carefully and professionally, the way people do when they're no longer asking for permission. For years, I operated at a level the structure didn't acknowledge. The company benefited from that. You gave the title to someone else, and that decision shaped everything that followed. You can't reverse the trust lost in that process. Not with money, not with a promotion. He swallowed. "So what are you saying?" "I'm resigning." Silence, long, dense, immovable. Not anger, not pleading, just the quiet realization of consequences arriving on schedule. Finally, he asked, "Is there anything I can say to change your mind?" "No," I said, "but I'll make the transition clean. Northbridge will be fully supported after I leave. I won't take anything from the company, and I won't solicit the account. You have my word." He nodded, defeated. "Send me the formal letter." I did. And just like that, after 7 years, the story they'd been writing about me ended, and the one I was writing for myself began. My last 3 weeks were calm. People often expect some dramatic walkout, but I chose the opposite. I documented every process, handed off every workflow, synced every thread. When Northbridge asked if I'd still be on their upcoming design workshop, I explained professionally that the company would assign a new lead. Ravi paused, then said quietly, "Well, that's their loss." On my final day, I walked out with nothing but a plant I regretted buying and a folder of harmless personal notes. No secrets, no documents, no drama. Clean exits travel farther. 3 months into my new role, VP of Strategic Accounts at a rival data center operator, I flew to Chicago for a conference. It was the first time I'd worn a badge with my new company's logo on it, and for the first time in years, my title actually matched the work I did. During a break between panels, I ran into Northbridge's CTO. He shook my hand hard enough to hurt. "You won't believe this," he said, lowering his voice. "We're planning Phase 2, Midwest expansion, and we want your team to bid." "I can't lead the pursuit," I told him immediately. "Conflict of interest." "Of course," he said. "We expected that. But your company will get the RFP. And you should know something. When our board reviewed the results of Phase 1, your name came up more than any vendor logo." He clapped my shoulder. "They thought you were gone. You're not." That simple sentence, calm, factual, settled into me with more satisfaction than any revenge fantasy ever could. My new company's legal team reviewed everything. No issues. Clean path. We submitted a proposal. And when the awards were announced months later, the result was precise and poetic, without being theatrical. My new company won the strategic high-margin portion of the expansion. My old company won a smaller, lower-margin slice. Both wins were legitimate. Only one was earned on trust. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't send screenshots to former colleagues. I just marked the date in my notebook and went back to work. 2 weeks after that, the CEO of my former company posted on LinkedIn about restructuring the strategic accounts organization to better align with performance. I didn't need inside information to know what that meant. They were rebuilding the structure around a hole they'd created themselves. Eric's title disappeared from the org chart shortly after. No dramatic firing, no scandal. Just a quiet correction. Corporate karma rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives as a calendar update. My life now is slower in the right places and sharper in the ones that matter. My team trusts me. My clients call me directly. My work matches my title. My title matches my compensation. And none of it depends on someone else's slide deck. Some mornings when I'm reviewing new RFPs over coffee, I think about that internal all hands, the one where the slide deck revealed who mattered and who didn't. Back then, I thought the company was defining my future. But the truth was simpler. They did not promote me. They revealed themselves. And the moment they did, I stopped waiting for recognition and started building a life that didn't require their permission. In the end, the $100 deal didn't make me valuable. It made me visible. And once that happened, the rest was just a matter of walking out the front door, with my name, my reputation, and the future they thought they controlled finally back in my hands. I never thought a grown man could say something that would make me feel 16 again. Small, guilty, like I'd done something wrong just by existing. But that's exactly how it felt when my boss leaned back in his leather chair, crossed his arms, and said, "Isn't $4,000 a month enough for you?" Not yelled, not mocked, just stated, like he was talking about the weather. And I swear, for a full second, my brain did that thing where it freezes, reboots, and tries to figure out if it heard correctly. Here's the part that makes this whole mess feel like a confession. $4,000 a month was barely enough to breathe in our city. Rent alone chewed half of it. Groceries, gas, and the privilege of existing in a place with functioning public transportation devoured the rest. But I'd never once complained, not once. This wasn't a story about me wanting more. It was a story about him wanting everything. For context, I worked in a small maintenance supply company, the kind that sells industrial cleaners, gloves, mops, and things nobody thinks about until they run out. I was the financial guy, which is a fancy way of saying I handled invoices, tracked orders, balanced accounts, and made sure the company's credit card didn't get declined in front of suppliers. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't miserable. It was just stable. Or at least it used to be. My boss, Leonard, had this way of talking that made even normal requests feel like accusations. He'd hover behind me during month-end reports, clicking his pen like a metronome of judgment. He'd ask me the same questions 3 different ways, as if hoping one version would catch me lying. And when I answered calmly, always calmly, he'd smirk like that was suspicious too. Still, the job was manageable. I kept my head down, learned his moods, and treated every sarcastic remark like background noise. I didn't give him a reason to doubt me, but somewhere around my 2nd year, things started shifting. Little things at first. An invoice for $312 that had no corresponding shipment, a vendor name I didn't recognize, a receipt for equipment replacement that was suspiciously vague. When I asked Leonard about the missing details, he'd wave a hand and say, "Handled. Just file it." That was fine, once, maybe twice, but it kept happening. Then there were the reimbursements, $480 for client entertainment, But the date matched a day Leonard didn't have any meetings scheduled. A $190 gas charge when his company car was supposedly in the shop. A hotel stay 2 cities away, marked as supplier visit, even though we hadn't onboarded anyone new in months. I didn't assume the worst. People make mistakes. Systems glitch. Vendors mislabel things. But there's a certain kind of silence that only exists when someone knows they're doing something wrong. And every time I'd bring up a discrepancy, that silence hung between us, heavy, intentional, warning me not to poke further. One afternoon, while reconciling statements, I found a payment for $2,000 marked as warehouse equipment upgrades. The note was in Leonard's handwriting. The problem? Our warehouse hadn't been touched in 3 years, unless you counted the spider webs that had upgraded themselves naturally. I checked the vendor address, then the phone number, then the registered business name. It took me about 3 minutes to realize the truth. The vendor didn't exist. The address was a P.O. box. The phone number was a burner line. And the business name? It matched a personal LLC Leonard used for consulting. That was the moment everything in my stomach dropped like a stone. Still, I didn't act. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Absolutely sure. Because accusing your boss of stealing from the company is the kind of thing that either saves your life or destroys it. And I wasn't going to gamble on guesses. So I did the only thing that felt safe. I watched. And I waited. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became painfully clear. Every missing dollar had the same fingerprints. Every questionable charge traced back to one source. Every discrepancy bent in the same direction, toward him. Yet Leonard walked around the office like he owned air itself. He'd tap my monitor with a knuckle when numbers didn't load fast enough. He'd sigh dramatically if I asked for clarification on an order. And once, I'll never forget this, he laughed when I brought lunch from home, saying, "Careful, Grant. People might think I'm not feeding you enough here." I smiled. Because that's what you do when someone who signs your paycheck tries to punch you in the dignity. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even particularly emotional. It was a Tuesday, a slow one. I'd stayed late to close out quarterlies, and Leonard wandered into my office like a bored cat. He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me like he was appraising something he already planned to throw away. That's when he said it. "Isn't $4,000 a month enough for you?" Just like that. No context, no explanation. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged, like the meaning should have been obvious. "You're lucky, you know. Most people your age don't make half that. You should work with gratitude instead of constantly nitpicking my reports." My reports, his handwriting, his theft, my blame. I remember sitting there, fingers resting on the keyboard, heartbeat suddenly slow and calm. Because in that moment, that exact moment, something inside me aligned. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. If he thought $4,000 a month bought my silence, he was about to learn what it really bought. I didn't answer him right away. He stood there, blocking the doorway, waiting for me to either agree I was overpaid or apologize for noticing numbers that didn't add up. That was Leonard's favorite trick. Turn reality into a personality flaw. "I'm not nitpicking," I said finally. "I'm doing my job. There are charges on the account that don't match inventory, vendors, or any projects we have open." He snorted. "You're overthinking it. That's your problem, Grant. You live in spreadsheets so long you forget there's a whole business around them." There was a time when a speech like that would have worked on me. I'd second-guess myself. Go back through everything. Assume I'd missed something obvious. But by then I'd checked the books 3 times. It wasn't noise. It was a pattern. "Then explain this one," I said, turning my monitor so he could see. I'd pulled up the $2,000 warehouse upgrade payment. We never received anything. The vendor address is a P.O. box, and the phone number doesn't connect to a supplier. He stared at the screen, and for half a second his eyes flicked. Just a tiny involuntary movement, like he'd walked into a room and forgotten why. Then the mask slid back on. "Do you think you know more about this company than I do?" he asked quietly. "That's not what I said." "You're making me repeat myself," he continued, ignoring me. "I approve the expenditures. You record them. If you can't handle that, maybe 4,000 a month is too generous for the skill set you're bringing." There it was again, the number as a leash. I let the silence sit. That made him more uncomfortable than arguing ever did. "I'll document my concerns," I said finally. "If there's an explanation, it'll be in writing. That protects both of us." His jaw tightened. "You don't need to document anything. You need to do your job." "I am," I replied. "That's the problem for you." That was the last thing I said before he walked out, muttering something about entitled employees under his breath. I didn't slam anything. I didn't rage. I just opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Q3 Reconciliation Backup. Inside it, I started saving copies of every suspicious transaction, every email where he dismissed questions, every statement that didn't line up. Then I plugged in a small external drive from my desk drawer and backed that folder up. Because if Leonard was right about one thing, it was this. The business was bigger than my spreadsheets, and I had a feeling the only way anyone would believe me was if I brought the whole picture. The next few weeks were a slow boil. Every time I brought something up, he'd twist it into an attitude issue. "Why are you obsessed with this? Do you think I'm stealing from my own company? Do you understand how insulting that is?" He never said the word fired, but it hung in the room like smoke. Then he started taking shots in front of other people. We were in the break room one morning when one of the sales guys, Mark, joked about his expense report being late. Leonard laughed and said, "Don't worry, Grant loves going through everyone's receipts. He treats it like a crime show." Everyone chuckled. I smiled a little, because what else do you do? But my face must have betrayed something, because Leonard added, "Relax, I'm paying you more than enough to care this much." Again with the number, again with the implication that my paycheck came with a gag order. The irritation built slowly, like grit in a shoe. I could have lived with the condescension. I'd lived with worse. What I couldn't live with was the realization that he was wiring money out of the company and leaving my name on the bottom of every report that said, "Reviewed by Grant Harrison." If it went bad, I wasn't a witness. I was a signature. I started coming in 30 minutes earlier and staying an hour later, not because I was a hero, because I needed time alone with the system. I exported full transaction histories. I pulled merchant codes from the credit card processor. I dug into bank transfers older than my employment, just to see how far this went. The deeper I went, the worse it got. There were payments to his LLC, marked as consulting fees, even though we didn't have any consulting agreements. There were client dinners on days we had no meetings scheduled. There was even a staff bonus disbursement that never hit anyone's paychecks except his. On paper, it looked like we were spending aggressively to grow. In reality, he was quietly hollowing the place out. One night, around 9 p.m., I was alone in the office with nothing but the hum of the old HVAC unit and the glow of the monitor. I had 3 years of data lined up, and the pattern was so clear it made my chest hurt. That was the moment something shifted for me. Up until then, I'd still been trying to fix it by talking to him, by assuming he'd stop if confronted enough. I sat back, stared at the mess, and realized I wasn't just dealing with a difficult boss. I was dealing with a man who was perfectly fine letting me take the fall if this ever blew up. That night, I stopped being the loyal employee trying to save his company. I started being a man trying to save his own life. The micro steps came next. I opened a personal email account separate from anything Leonard knew. I sent myself encrypted archives of the reports, statements, and flagged transactions. I printed a few key documents and put them in a plain folder at home, tucked behind the boring stuff no one ever steals: tax returns and appliance warranties. I also did something that felt small but wasn't. I booked an appointment with a financial crimes attorney for a consultation. I didn't even know exactly what I'd asked yet. I just knew I needed someone who'd see numbers the way I did, as evidence. While all of this was happening, Leonard's attitude kept sliding from passive-aggressive to openly hostile. He started calling me into his office for performance check-ins that were thinly disguised interrogations. "You've seemed distracted. You're not as positive in meetings as you used to be. I need team players, Grant. People who appreciate what they're given. Appreciate what they're given." I was watching him siphon tens of thousands out of the company, and he was talking about my gratitude. The injustice of it sat under my skin, hot and sour. Still, I played my part. I nodded, said I understood, promised to focus on solutions. The more he underestimated me, the more space I had to work. The first tiny win came from somewhere unexpected. Our external accountant, Lydia, came in to review the quarterly. She was sharp, no nonsense, and not the type Leonard could charm. I watched her face as she flipped through the reports I'd prepped. Her eyes lingered a beat too long on one particular page. "Can you print the backup for these consulting fees?" she asked. Leonard answered before I could. "They're all in order. I can send them later. We had to outsource some project planning." She didn't argue. She just made a small note on her pad. Later, when Leonard left for a late lunch, she stopped by my desk. "You look tired," she said quietly. "Quarterlies," I replied. She lowered her voice. "If something doesn't make sense on paper, it usually doesn't make sense in real life either." Our eyes met for a second. She didn't say more. She didn't have to. I walked away from that interaction with one clear message. If this turned into a fire, I wasn't the only person who'd smelled smoke. But that was just the beginning. Leonard must have sensed he was losing narrative control, because his next move was to get ahead of it by going on the offensive. He called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, the kind of timing bosses choose when they want you stewing all weekend. His blinds were half closed, light cutting in thin, dusty lines. "I've been looking at your hours," he began, "and your productivity." I almost laughed. My productivity was the reason he was still walking free. "You're spending too much time digging into old transactions," he continued. "That's not what I pay you for. You create extra work, you slow us down, and frankly, you make me wonder if you're the right fit here." There it was. The threat? "If you think I'm not the right fit," I said calmly, "you should document that, in writing." He stared at me, thrown off by how steady my voice was. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. "It means if there's a performance problem, we both deserve a clear record," I replied, "so there's no confusion later." His eyes narrowed. "You really think that $4,000 makes you untouchable, huh?" I shook my head. "I think it makes me responsible, and I take that seriously." He leaned forward. "Let me be perfectly clear. If you keep raising concerns about things you don't understand, we're going to have a different conversation, one that doesn't end with you walking back to your desk." I held his gaze. "Then maybe we should both make sure we understand everything." He waved me off like swatting a fly. "We're done." We weren't. Not even close. I walked out of that office with my heart pounding, but not from fear, from decision. If he was willing to threaten my job to protect his theft, he was telling me exactly how dangerous he was. On my way home that night, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Lydia, the external accountant. "Grant, I'd like to schedule a separate call next week to clarify a few entries. Strictly procedural." Strictly procedural. Sure, I stared at that line in my car, parked outside my apartment, hands still on the steering wheel. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment things started sliding out of Leonard's control and into mine. The call with Lydia was scheduled for Tuesday at 9:30 a.m., a time too early for Leonard to hover, and too late for him to pretend he just didn't see the invite. She opened with routine questions, vendor codes, invoice formatting, a few outdated categories, nothing that would alarm anyone listening. Then her tone shifted. "There are 3 consulting fees from the same LLC," she said, "all approved by Leonard. Do you know what these were for?" I kept my voice neutral. No documentation was provided. And you asked for it? Multiple times. She paused. And the response? Dismissed. There was a soft exhale on the other end of the line. Not surprise, confirmation. Grant, she said quietly, I need you to send me the detailed records you have. The unfiltered ones. I hesitated. Is this official? No, she said. Not yet. But it will be. And when it is, you're going to want to be on the right side of the paper trail. That was the moment the ground shifted under Leonard, even if he didn't feel it yet. Because once an external accountant smells fraud, it's not a matter of if, it's when. Still, I didn't rush. My job wasn't to burn the building down. My job was to make sure I wasn't inside when it collapsed. So I sent Lydia exactly what she asked for. Every flagged transaction, every questionable charge, every vague approval. And then I waited. 2 days later, chaos began. Not loud chaos. Not screaming or cops or alarms. The quieter kind, the kind that happens when people in positions of power start asking the wrong man the right questions. At 10 a.m., the owners of the company, who lived in another state and only visited quarterly, suddenly logged into the shared accounting drive. At 10:07, they opened the expense reports for the last 2 years. At 10:09, they opened the reconciliation backups I'd created. They stayed logged in for 2 hours. Leonard didn't notice. He was too busy telling the sales team they needed to push harder this quarter, as if motivation were a faucet he could turn on. Around noon, he walked into my office with a forced smile. We're meeting in 10, he announced. Owners on Zoom, routine check-in. Routine? Sure. He sat at the conference table like a man about to host a cooking show. The owners joined with cameras on, faces stiff, voices clipped. We went through inventory, vendor performance, supply costs. Then one of them, Patricia, the older woman with the dry voice and no patience for theatrics, said, Leonard, can you explain the consulting fees we found from LR Strategic Solutions? My heart didn't race. My face didn't flush. I just watched the exact moment Leonard's world tilted. He blinked. Which ones? The ones you approved. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Leonard glanced at me, probably hoping for backup, some shared lie we'd rehearsed. I looked back with the expression of a man whose conscience had finally gone on vacation. They're legitimate, he said. We brought in outside help for planning. Planning what? Patricia asked. There it was. The first crack. He stammered something about restructuring initiatives and efficiency targets. The owners interrupted him 3 times. Then they asked for documentation. Leonard tried to pivot, tried to charm, tried to downplay. None of it worked. The meeting ended abruptly with, We'll follow up later today. Grant, please stay available. Leonard left the room so fast the chair spun. I followed slowly, deliberately. Every step felt like stones settling into place. He cornered me near the hallway. What the hell did you give them? He hissed. My reports, I said. The same ones you approved. You're trying to sabotage me? No, I replied. I'm making sure the numbers add up. His face turned the color of bad deli ham. You think you're clever? You think they'll believe you over me? You're a mid-level employee making $4,000 a month. There it was again. $4,000. His entire worldview. I didn't accuse you of anything, I said. They asked for information. I provided it. He jabbed a finger at my chest. If this blows up, you're going down with me. I didn't flinch. Only if I've done something wrong. That was the moment he realized he'd lost control of me. His eyes changed. Fear, then anger, then calculation. He stormed into his office and slammed the door. I went back to work. At 3:14 p.m., everything accelerated. The corporate attorney emailed me requesting copies of the flagged transactions. The owners emailed a list of follow-up questions. All for Leonard. Lydia emailed me privately. Stay calm. The wheels are moving. Leonard noticed the shift in energy like an animal sensing an earthquake. He kept pacing past my door, pretending to check the thermostat or printer. At 4:02, he finally snapped. He barged into my office and threw a stack of invoices onto my desk. "Fix these," he barked. I scanned them. They were ancient invoices, all legitimate ones, but he'd highlighted random lines in red marker. Nothing made sense. "These don't need fixing," I said. "They do if I say they do." I closed the folder. "Leonard, what are you really doing right now?" He stared at me like he wanted to tear my skin off. "You've been digging where you shouldn't, spreading paranoia, undermining me." I didn't look away. "I documented discrepancies. That's my job." "No," he said. "Your job is what I tell you it is." I stood, slowly, calmly. "No," I said. "My job is protecting the company's financial integrity." Something inside him broke, not emotionally, but strategically. He realized then that I wasn't scared, and fear had always been his leverage. "You know what?" he spat. "Maybe we should reconsider your position. Maybe 4,000 a month is too much after all. Maybe." And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. His computer chimed, then chimed again, then again. Emails, notifications, calendar alerts. He walked stiffly to his desk and opened his inbox. I couldn't see the screen, but I saw his posture collapse. The owners had sent him an emergency meeting request. Immediate. The corporate attorney was CC'd. So was HR. So was Lydia. He looked up at me, eyes wide and full of a fear he could no longer hide. "What did you do?" he whispered. I picked up my notebook and pen. "I told the truth." He sank into his chair like the air had been punched out of his lungs. "They think I stole," he muttered, staring at his screen. I didn't respond. He buried his face in his hands. "This is a misunderstanding. They're overreacting. You should join your meeting," I said softly. He looked up, eyes red. "They're going to destroy me." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But inside, something quiet and long suffocated finally exhaled. He stood slowly and walked to the conference room like a man being led to the gallows, and they thought I was gone. I wasn't, not even close. They kept Leonard in that conference room for almost an hour. I didn't hear raised voices, just muffled, steady talking, the kind people use when they're making decisions they don't plan to walk back. At some point, HR pinged me. "Grant, please be available to join when called." I kept working. Numbers are good for that. They don't care if your boss is being dissected in the next room. They just want to add up. 50 minutes in, my phone buzzed again. "Conference room now, please." Leonard was already seated when I walked in, shoulders tight, eyes bloodshot. The owners were on the big screen, Lydia in a smaller window, corporate counsel in another. HR sat at the far end of the table, legal pad open. "Grant," Patricia said, "we have a few questions about the records you prepared." I pulled out my notebook, just like any other meeting. She walked me through entries one by one. I explained what I'd seen when I'd asked for backup, what answers I'd received. I kept it boring. Boring is safe. Boring is trustworthy, Leonard interrupted 3 times. He's overstepping his role. He's misinterpreting the data. He doesn't understand how these arrangements work. Each time they let him talk. Each time they went right back to me. Finally, counsel cleared his throat. "Leonard, there appear to be payments from the company account to an LLC you control, with no supporting contracts or deliverables. Is that accurate?" Leonard tried to smile. "It's all above board. I've floated personal funds to the company in the past. These are repayments. We just didn't formalize it." "And why?" counsel asked. "Didn't you disclose that to the ownership group or to our office?" Silence. Leonard's hand closed into a fist on the table. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "We're talking about supporting my own business. The amounts are small compared to—" "They total over $80,000, Patricia cut in. "That's not small." Her tone didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Leonard's eyes flicked to me again, desperate now. "He's the one who signed off on the reports," he snapped. "Every month. Reviewed by Grant. He's as responsible as I am." maybe more. There it was, the throw. I met his gaze, then looked straight into the camera. I signed off on the reports using the information I had, I said. Every time something didn't make sense, I flagged it. Verbally first, then by email. When those concerns were dismissed, I documented that dismissal. I don't approve what I can't see. Lydia nodded slightly in her little video box. That matches my experience, she said. The questions were there. The answers were not. HR scribbled something down. Counsel spoke again, voice neutral. Leonard, given the volume and structure of these payments, we'll need to conduct a formal audit and suspend your access to all financial systems effective immediately. Leonard stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. You can't be serious, he whispered. Patricia folded her hands. We are. He turned to me like he still had one card left. Grant, tell them, he said. You know I put you in a good position here. I've paid you well. I've given you... Somewhere in the middle of his sentence, I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. You've given me $4,000 a month, I said quietly. You've also put my name under reports that hid your withdrawals. I'm not taking the fall for money I never saw. For a second, no one spoke. That was my small explosion. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. HR closed the folder in front of her. Leonard, she said, standing, let's step into your office to arrange your transition. Transition, he repeated, as if he'd never heard the word before. He left without looking back. The door closed. The air shifted. On the screen, Patricia exhaled. Grant, she said, we appreciate your diligence. Lydia has recommended that we retain you as our primary internal point of contact during the audit, if you're willing. If it's structured properly, I replied, and in writing. Something like a smile crossed her face. We'll put it in writing. That was the end of the meeting. Not cinematic, just administrative. But the interesting thing about paperwork is how fast it can become reality. By the end of the day, Leonard's email was disabled. His keycard stopped working. A third-party forensic team had access to every transaction for the last 5 years. He came back only once, late in the afternoon, escorted by HR to box up his office. I kept my head down, but I felt him stop in my doorway. You think you've won, he said. I turned in my chair. I think you stole from the people who trusted you, I replied, and I think they finally noticed. You won't last here, he shot back. They'll turn on you next. Maybe, I said, but I'll see them coming. He stared at me, jaw working like he wanted to spit something out and couldn't find the words. Then he shook his head, laughed once, a short, bitter sound, and walked away. They took his name off the website the next morning. The audit took months. Those things always do. They work layer by layer, code by code, until even the lies are tired. During that time, my world got strangely simple. I answered questions. I pulled records. I clarified timelines. I met with counsel twice, the owners once. No one raised their voice. No one asked me to be grateful. They just wanted the truth. The truth, when it finally landed, was ugly and unsurprising. Leonard had been siphoning money for at least 4 years. Not enough at once to trigger automatic alarms. Just a steady drip. Consulting fees, bogus reimbursements, phantom vendor payments. By the time they tallied it, the total was closer to $120,000. The owner's attorneys handled the rest. There were negotiations, demands, words like misappropriation and criminal exposure floating through emails. I didn't see Leonard again. I did hear through Lydia that there'd been a settlement and that the company reserved the right to pursue criminal charges if he violated the terms. But that wasn't the part that stayed with me. What stayed with me was a short meeting 2 weeks after the audit wrapped. Me, Patricia, and the other owner on the screen. Grant, she began, we want to formally thank you for how you handled this. You were put in a bad position, and you acted with integrity. We'd like to increase your salary and give you a new title to reflect your responsibilities. The raise was generous. The new title sounded good on paper. I sat with it for a second. I appreciate that, I said. I really do. But I think it's time for me to move on. They looked genuinely surprised. May we ask why? The other owner said. Because for 2 years, I answered. I came in here worried that if everything fell apart, I'd be the only one who knew how it happened, and no one listened until it benefited them. I don't want to work anywhere I have to prove I'm telling the truth about numbers that are right in front of everyone. They didn't argue. They didn't threaten. Patricia just nodded slowly. Fair enough, she said. We'll support you in the transition. You'll have a strong reference from us. And they meant it. I stayed another month to help the new controller get up to speed. I documented processes, explained supplier quirks, handed over my carefully labeled chaos. Then, on a quiet Friday, I packed my own box. 1 monitor stand, a coffee mug, a plant that had somehow survived 3 winters, and walked out. My next job didn't come from luck. It came from Lydia. She introduced me to a mid-sized firm across town that needed someone who could clean up messy books without panicking. The pay was more than $4,000. The culture was different in all the ways that mattered. In my first week, the new boss, a woman named Claire, called me into her office. If you see anything in the accounts that doesn't make sense, she said, I expect you to tell me. Loudly. Even if it's my mistake. Especially if it's mine. I believed her, not because she said it, but because she put it in the company policy she handed me. These days, my life is boring in the best possible way. I get up, make coffee the way I like it, sit at a desk where my signature means accuracy, not cover. My rent is paid. My fridge isn't empty. No one hovers behind me clicking a pen like a loaded weapon. Sometimes, when a junior staffer hesitates before pointing out an inconsistency, I recognize the look. Say it, I tell them. If something doesn't add up, it matters. I don't name Leonard. I don't need to. Every now and then, someone from the old place texts me a rumor. He's consulting for some tiny outfit now. He tried to start his own company, but nobody trusts him. Remember when he used to brag about how much he took care of us? I read the messages, put my phone down, and go back to work. People like to think revenge is loud. Slamming doors, shouting matches, dramatic exits. Mine wasn't. Mine was a series of quiet decisions, documented questions, and one boundary I refused to back away from. The last time Leonard's voice crossed my mind clearly was on a drive home from the new job, paycheck in my pocket, windows cracked, city rolling by. Isn't $4,000 a month enough for you? It echoed differently then, because it had never really been a question. It was a statement about what he thought I was worth and what he thought he could buy with that amount. My silence, my signature, my willingness to carry his theft on my back. He was wrong. $4,000 a month wasn't enough for that. 5 wouldn't have been. 10 wouldn't have been. The only enough in this whole story was the moment I decided I'd had it. Enough of being talked down to. Enough of watching him siphon what wasn't his. Enough of pretending gratitude and fear were the same thing. I couldn't make him honest. I couldn't make the company cease sooner. I couldn't get those stolen dollars back. But I could refuse to be the man who stayed quiet while someone else wrote my name under their crime. So that's what I did. And now, when I look at my payslip at the end of the month, there's no question attached to it. I earn what I make, I keep what's mine, and no one ever again gets to ask me if my integrity has a price. I got fired because an old woman slapped me in the face in front of my whole company. That's the short version I tell people when I don't feel like explaining. It sounds like a joke, like one of those "you won't believe what happened at our company dinner" posts. But it wasn't a joke when her ring cut my lip and I tasted blood, while my coworkers stared at their bread plates. It was supposed to be a safe night for someone like me. Company dinners are easy when you're the quiet guy from operations. You show up on time, you shake hands, you laugh 2 seconds after everyone else, you leave before the drunk VP starts calling people family. You don't make waves. That was the plan. The restaurant was one of those over-polished hotel places our CEO loves. Dim lighting, fake candles, napkins folded like something expensive and pointless. They'd rented a private room, long table, name cards, tiny printed menu, with 3 choices that all sounded like they cost too much. I found my name somewhere in the middle, not near the CEO, not near the exits, middle of the herd, exactly where I usually live. My boss, Daniel, was working the room like it was his wedding. He's mid-40s, perfect hair, the kind of guy who remembers your wife's name but forgets your job title. "Ethan, you made it," he said when he passed me. Hand on my shoulder, quick squeeze, already looking over me to whoever was behind. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. I'd almost missed it on purpose. I noticed her before I knew who she was. Small, sharp, early 70s maybe, in a dark green dress that looked heavier than she was. She had the kind of posture you don't see anymore. Back straight, chin up, like the room belonged to her. She was sitting at the end of the table where the executives were, next to Daniel's empty chair, a glass of white wine hovering in front of her lips. People went up to her one by one, quick bent spines, nervous laughs. She barely smiled. I assumed she was some board member's wife, someone I'd never have to think about again. The HR director, Megan, did the welcome speech, of course. A few polite jokes about finally being together in person, a cliché about our people being our greatest asset, the usual noise. Glasses clinked, conversations restarted in little islands. Cutlery began to scrape. I focused on my safe zones. The guy from IT who only talks about cycling. The woman from accounting who always has a funny story about her kids. I put my social mask on. Nod, ask a question, take small bites, swallow faster than I taste. It was going okay. The problem started with a waiter and a bottle of red wine. He came up behind me while I was standing. I'd gotten up to let someone squeeze past my chair to the restroom. At the same time, Daniel appeared at my side and said, "Ethan, have you met my mother yet?" in that bright tone that means it's not really a question. I turned, half blocked by my own chair, and saw his mother, the woman in green, trying to stand at the head of the table. The waiter stepped left and I stepped right. Someone bumped my back. For a second, all I saw was silver and glass. My elbow clipped the waiter's arm. The bottle tipped. I watched, helpless and too slow, as a wave of red wine poured forward in slow motion. It didn't hit the table. It hit her. The wine splashed across her chest and shoulder, a dark stain blooming across the green fabric like a wound. A couple of drops hit her face. One landed right below her eye, slid down like a fake tear. "Oh my God," I said, already reaching for napkins. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. She moved faster than I expected for someone her age. Her hand came up, fingers tight, and she slapped me across the face so hard my head snapped sideways. The room went silent on impact, like someone had pressed mute. The sound echoed off the walls. Not movie loud, but loud enough that everyone in that private room heard it. My cheek burned. Her ring had a stone in it. It caught the corner of my mouth. I tasted iron. "You clumsy animal," she hissed, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Do you know what this dress costs? Look what you've done." The waiter froze, bottle still in his hand, eyes wide. I held the napkins uselessly, stuck somewhere between wanting to help and wanting to disappear into the floor. I'm so sorry," I repeated. My voice sounded wrong in my own ears. "It was my fault. I didn't see—" "You pushed him," she snapped. "You shoved that boy into me like a drunk in a bar." "Is this how you treat your elders?" Her eyes were sharp, clear, furious, the kind of fury that doesn't care about facts. "Mom," Daniel said finally, stepping between us, "it was an accident. Ethan works for me. He didn't mean—" "Don't defend him," she cut him off. "If this is the kind of person you hire, maybe that's why your numbers look the way they do." A couple of executives suddenly found their phones very interesting. No one laughed. Somewhere to my left, a fork clinked against a plate and then stopped moving. I wanted to explain that I'd been bumped, that the waiter had been too close, that I'd been trying to make room, not cause chaos. It didn't matter. The story had already been told out loud, and it wasn't mine. Megan from HR appeared at my elbow just as my brain caught up to what my body had done. "Ethan," she murmured, the way someone might talk to a patient who's about to make a scene. "Let's step outside for a second, okay?" "I can help clean," I started. "No," Daniel's mother snapped. "He's done enough." Megan's fingers closed lightly around my arm, not rough but firm, a grip that didn't really invite discussion. "Come on," she said, with a tight smile that was for the room, not for me. I let her lead me away from the table, past faces suddenly fascinated by bread baskets and candle flames. Nobody met my eyes, except one person. At the far end of the room, at a small side table near the wall, an older man sat alone, with a half-finished plate and a glass of water. I'd seen him when I came in and assumed he was some quiet investor or someone's relative. He wore a simple dark suit, no tie, silver hair combed back. He looked straight at me, not away, not down. Our eyes met for a second. His expression didn't say, "poor guy," or "what an idiot." It was something flatter, more focused, like he was mentally rewinding the last 30 seconds and saving them. Then Megan pushed the door open, and the low restaurant music swallowed the silence behind us. In the hallway, the light was brighter, harsher. My cheek still stung. I touched it with my fingertips and saw a smear of red. For some reason, the sight of my own blood on my skin made the whole thing feel more ridiculous, not less. "I'm really sorry," I said again because it was all I had. "It was an accident. The waiter—" "Ethan," Megan interrupted, her professional voice already loaded and ready. She'd switched from party mode to HR mode in a single breath. "This isn't the place to process this. Emotions are high, and Mrs. Carter is very upset." "Mrs. Carter," I repeated, like the name might change something in my head. "Daniel's mother," she clarified, as if that needed clarifying. "She's also a major shareholder. You understand how delicate this is." I did. That was the worst part. I understood exactly how delicate it was. "I didn't push him," I said quietly. "I got bumped." We both moved at the same time. It was just bad timing. "I hear you," Megan said the way HR people say, "I hear you," when they are also hearing their own job description in the background. "But right now, the priority is de-escalation. She feels you were aggressive." Aggressive. The word sat in my chest like a stone. "I didn't even raise my voice," I said. "She hit me." Megan's eyes flicked to my cheek, then away. "I saw that," she said, "and I'm sorry that happened. I truly am. But I also saw you standing very close. And from her perspective, there was nowhere else to stand," I said, more sharply than I meant to. The hallway was empty except for a tall plant and a framed print of something abstract. My voice bounced faintly off the walls. The waiter was behind me. Daniel was in front of me. The chair was at my knees. I wasn't trying to... "Ethan," she said again, with that careful calm that sounds like it was practiced in a training session, "I'm going to ask you to head home for the night. Get some rest. We'll talk about this tomorrow in the office, okay?" I stared at her. "You're sending me home?" "Yes," she said. "Given how upset she is, it's better if you're not here when people are trying to enjoy the evening." "She slapped me in front of everyone," I said, keeping my voice low, because shouting wouldn't help. "And I'm the one being removed so people can enjoy dessert." Her jaw tightened for half a second. I understand how unfair that feels. "That's not what I said." She took a breath. "Ethan, I'm asking you, professionally, to trust the process. We will review what happened. But right now, you being here is only going to escalate the situation for a very important member of the Carter family. You know the company's position on protecting our brand and relationships." I did know. We'd all signed that handbook. "Am I being fired?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "This is not a termination. This is a temporary removal from a social setting that has become charged. Tomorrow we'll sit down, you'll share your side, and we'll go from there. Okay?" I thought about walking back into that room and sitting down at my name card with a fresh glass of wine, pretending nothing had happened while Daniel's mother glared holes through my skull. I pictured the way everyone would avoid looking at me, the way this story would twist by morning if I stayed. "Fine," I said. "I'll go." "Thank you," Megan replied, a little too relieved. "I'll check in with you first thing." She turned to go back inside, then hesitated and looked at me again. "If anyone asks, I'm telling them you weren't feeling well." "Sure," I said, "whatever makes it easier to swallow." She didn't answer that. She slipped back through the door, and the low hum of conversation rushed out for a second before it closed again. I walked down the corridor alone, past the front desk and the lounge area, out through the revolving door into cold air. My cheek throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I could still see the line of wine running down her dress, her hand cutting through the space between us like I'd deserved it. In the reflection of the hotel window, I caught a glimpse of myself, slightly loosened tie, bleeding lip, that stunned, tight expression people wear when they're trying to act like something didn't just humiliate them in public. Behind me, through the glass, I saw movement near the private room door. The older man from the side table stepped out for a moment, eyes following where I'd gone. He didn't call out. He just watched me walk toward the parking lot, hands in his pockets, like he was filing the whole scene away somewhere I couldn't see. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I mostly lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment her hand cracked across my face. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that sound again. Not the slap, but the silence after. The kind of silence that tells you people have already picked a side, and it isn't yours. I showed up at the office the next morning 15 minutes early, which was stupid, because I already knew they weren't going to treat this like a normal workday. It was raining, thin, steady lines tapping on the windows as I swiped my badge. The lobby security guard nodded at me, but his eyes held that look, that I heard something look. By the time I reached my floor, Megan from HR was already waiting outside the conference room. Clipboard, neutral smile, the whole HR armor. "Morning, Ethan," she said, like yesterday didn't exist. "Morning. Let's sit down for a moment." The moment stretched into a conversation that wasn't a conversation. She spoke. I listened. Because that's what HR calls hearing your side. She folded her hands. "I've spoken to several attendees from last night." I nodded once. "Did you speak to the waiter?" Her pause answered for her. "I spoke to the individuals who came forward." "Right," I said. "The ones who were afraid to contradict a major shareholder." "Ethan," she warned softly, "we're not assigning blame. We're assessing risk." "Risk?" That was the word. Not truth, not fairness, not proportionality. "Risk," she continued. "Given the high-profile nature of the incident and Mrs. Carter's emotional response, leadership feels it's best to place you on administrative leave, pending a full review." "Administrative leave," I repeated, feeling the floor tilt just a little. "It's not punitive," she rushed to add, "it's precautionary." "Do I get to know what I'm being precautionarily removed from?" She hesitated. "There are concerns about your, response to the situation." I actually laughed. Not loud. Just one bitter exhale. "My response?" I apologized. She slapped me. "She maintained she felt physically threatened," Megan said, "given her age and your proximity." "I wasn't physically threatening anybody," I said sharply. I was trying not to fall over a chair. She hit me. "And your concern is her narrative?" Megan lowered her voice. "This is a sensitive family matter. As you know, the Carters own half the company," I finished. "Yeah, I'm aware." She didn't deny it. She just tapped her pen nervously. "I need you to hand over your badge for now," she said gently. "We'll check in within the week." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I handed it over. She took it like it was fragile. "Thank you." I walked out through the main office. People looked busy. Too busy. Eyes flicked away the second I glanced their direction. Conversations died when I passed. Even the intern at reception stiffened like I was something toxic. I reached the elevators, pressed the down button, and tried to swallow the feeling climbing up my chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was something duller, heavier. The sense that a single stupid, accidental moment had undone years of playing things safe, years of being quiet, competent, agreeable, and none of it mattered. One slap from the wrong person, and suddenly I was the problem. The elevator doors slid open, but before I stepped inside, someone called out behind me. "Ethan?" I turned. The older man from the dinner, the one who'd watched everything, was standing in the hallway with a coat folded over his arm. Up close, he looked even more composed, his face lined in a way that made him seem thoughtful rather than old. "I was hoping I'd catch you," he said. I blinked. "Sir, I didn't know you worked here." "I don't," he said with a small smile. "Not yet, technically. I joined the board as of yesterday morning. Independent oversight. Last night was my introduction to the team. That explained the reserved seat, the silence, the way he observed instead of participating. I'm Mitchell," he added, offering his hand. I shook it automatically. Firm grip, calm eyes, not a man easily rattled. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I almost said fine, because that's the default answer. Instead, what came out was confused. "That's an honest word," he said. "Most people choose a prettier one." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. He looked at me for a moment, studying, not judging. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "Every second of it." My throat tightened. "Doesn't seem to matter." "Oh, it matters," he said. "More than you think." "That's not what HR believes." He let out a short breath. "HR believes whatever keeps the company out of legal or emotional trouble. Truth is often inconvenient to that goal." I didn't know whether to laugh or sit down. "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying," he replied, "that what happened last night didn't sit right with me. And I'm going to ask you a few questions, not as an investigator, not as your boss, but as someone who wants to understand something clearly." I frowned. "Okay." He stepped a little closer, voice lowering. "When she slapped you, did you say anything threatening? Move toward her? Make any gesture that could be misinterpreted?" "No," I said immediately. "Nothing like that. I apologized. I didn't even raise my hands." He nodded slowly, as though confirming something he already believed. "And HR?" he asked. "Did they give you a chance to speak freely?" "No," I admitted. "They told me to go home. Now I'm on leave." Mitchell exhaled through his nose. "That's what I feared." "Why does it matter?" I asked, frustration leaking through. "They're going to believe her. Everyone always does." He gave me a look that was almost sad. "Ethan, people like her are used to rewriting reality. They've been doing it their whole lives. And they get away with it because no one important ever contradicts them." Then he added more sharply, "But that was just the beginning." Something in his tone made my skin prickle. "What do you mean?" I asked. He adjusted his coat over his arm. "I'm going to make some calls. I'd like you to stay reachable." "For what?" I asked slowly. He gave me a thin, controlled smile. Not warm, calculated. "For the truth," he said, "and for the consequences that come after it." Then he walked past me and pressed the elevator button for the top floor. The doors slid open. He stepped inside without looking back. I stood there alone, rain tapping against the windows, badgeless, jobless, and with no idea that the ground under the company was already shifting, and that every person who'd looked away last night was about to feel the tremor. I didn't hear from HR for the rest of that day, but other people were suddenly very loud. By noon, my inbox, the personal one, not the deactivated work email, started filling with messages from coworkers who'd never written me before. Short, nervous things. "Hang in there. Saw what happened. Sorry, man. They're talking about it upstairs." Nobody said what it was. Nobody wanted to put anything in writing. By late afternoon, the tone changed. "Something's going on. Daniel looks like hell." 2 board members arrived unexpectedly. I didn't know whether to be hopeful or terrified. Around 5, I got a text from an unknown number. Be ready. M. Mitchell. Short, controlled. Like a man who didn't waste characters. I didn't sleep well again that night, because that was the first time I realized something. Whatever Mitchell was doing, it wasn't for show. The next morning, another message. Conference call today. You'll be contacted. No explanation, no details. Just enough to keep my pulse climbing. I paced my apartment, trying to decide if I should dress like I was going into the office or like I was going into a courtroom. I settled on a simple button-down, the one that didn't make me look like I was trying too hard. At 11:12, my phone rang. Not HR. A board liaison. Voice calm, emotionless, scripted. Mr. Gray, the board requests your presence for a remote statement. You'll receive a link shortly. A statement. Not an interview, not a check-in. A statement. Something was very wrong higher up. A second later, the link arrived. I clicked it. My laptop screen went black for a moment, then loaded a conference window with 7 muted cameras. No faces yet. Then they began switching on, one by one. I recognized 2 board members from company newsletters. I recognized Mitchell immediately. I recognized Daniel last. He looked pale, eyes sunken, shoulders tight, like he hadn't slept. His tie wasn't straight, which told me everything before anyone said anything. And then a voice, steady, judicial, older. Mr. Gray, thank you for joining us. I swallowed. Yes, sir. This is a formal review concerning an incident involving you, a company shareholder, and an HR assessment. Before we begin, do you have representation present? Representation? My pulse kicked hard. No. I wasn't told. That's fine, the voice cut gently. You're not under investigation, you're providing testimony. Daniel's eyes flicked up at that. HR wasn't on the call, just leadership. Mitchell leaned forward slightly. Ethan, please describe the events of last night exactly as you remember them. So I did. Everything. The waiter, the bump, the spill, the slap. HR escorting me out, the hallway conversation, the administrative leave. I didn't dramatize anything, didn't add heat, didn't add emotion, just the facts in their exact order. When I finished, the screen was silent. Then one board member unmuted. And you did not raise your voice? No, sir. You made no physical movement toward Mrs. Carter? No. And she struck you first? Yes. Mitchell clicked his pen softly, not impatience. Confirmation. Then he turned his camera on fully. Yesterday, he began, I asked for internal reports regarding Mrs. Carter's past behavior at company functions. Daniel's head dropped slightly. Mitchell continued, voice like steel being sharpened slowly. What I found was a pattern of verbal aggression, intoxication, and inappropriate interactions recorded by staff, and repeatedly suppressed. My stomach tightened. Suppressed. Meaning HR had been burying complaints. Meaning this wasn't the first time she'd lashed out at an employee. Mitchell turned to the board. Additionally, video footage from the restaurant's security camera has been retrieved. I froze. Footage. There was footage. That changed everything. The board chair cleared his throat. We have reviewed the recording. Mr. Gray's account is accurate. Daniel finally lifted his head in a jerky motion. I didn't know there were cameras. That, the chair said coldly, is part of the issue. Daniel opened his mouth again, but Mitchell cut him off with a measured calm that was scarier than anger. Your mother assaulted an employee. Then HR removed the employee instead of addressing the aggression. This is a glaring breach of policy. And you, he turned his gaze on Daniel, allowed it to happen. It all happened so fast, Daniel said, almost a whisper. So do car crashes, Mitchell replied, but we still assign responsibility. Another board member spoke up. Mitchell has recommended an internal audit into HR handling over the past 2 years. Daniel's face drained of all color. And then, the moment that shifted everything. Mitchell leaned forward and said very quietly, I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. A cold sentence, a sentence that promised fallout. The chair turned back to me. Mr. Gray, you will receive full pay until this review concludes. We also want to make clear that you have not been found at fault in any capacity. My chest loosened, just a little. We may request additional information, he continued, but for now, that is all. The call ended, just like that. I sat there in my apartment, laptop still open, rain tapping the window again like a replay of yesterday, heart thudding. My phone buzzed, a text from a coworker. Dude, HR is losing it. Megan is crying. Daniel shut himself in his office. Everyone's whispering that something huge is happening. Another, they thought you were gone. You're not. Another, whatever that board guy is doing, it's blowing up fast. And I realized something then. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't even about the slap. This was about a whole structure built on intimidation and silence, and someone finally pulling the thread at the top. My part was done. The rest? The rest was already unfolding behind glass doors and conference calls I wasn't invited to. But the tremor had started, and the real cracks were still coming. The call came 3 days later, just after noon, when the light through my blinds was a thin, washed-out strip across the floor. I'd been trying to keep myself busy, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, opening the fridge just to close it again. I wasn't waiting for anything, but I wasn't moving forward either. When the phone rang and I saw the company number, my stomach tightened like a fist. I answered anyway. Mr. Gray, the voice said. Not HR, not Megan. This voice was older, more formal. The board would like you to come in today, conference room 5A. My throat was suddenly dry. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. Not comforting. I ironed my shirt twice, even though it didn't need it. I shaved again. I walked to the car, slow, like each step needed permission. The parking lot felt too big, empty in a way it never looked before. Inside, the receptionist didn't even ask me to sign in. She just nodded and pointed toward the elevators, eyes wide like she knew something, but not enough to risk words. When the elevator doors opened on my floor, it was silent. Not office quiet, funeral quiet. Conference room 5A was at the end of the hall. The door was half open. I pushed it gently. 3 people sat inside. The board chair, another member I recognized, and Mitchell. Hands folded, expression unreadable. Daniel wasn't there. HR wasn't there. His mother definitely wasn't there. Mr. Gray, the chair said, standing. Thank you for coming. I nodded. Of course. Please sit. I did. The chair didn't waste time. We've concluded our review. The pause that followed was deliberate. You were not at fault in any part of the altercation. The evidence is clear. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. Mitchell leaned back slightly, watching me, not evaluating, just confirming that I heard him. The chair continued. What concerns us is not only the incident itself, but the systemic mishandling by management and HR, suppression of reports, failure to intervene, misrepresentation of employee behavior. This goes far beyond what happened at the dinner. He exchanged a look with the other board member. As of this morning, he said, Daniel Carter has submitted his resignation. I froze. He? What? Effective immediately, the chair said. He was given the opportunity to step down quietly. He accepted it. I stared at the table for a moment, letting the words land. Daniel, the always confident, always composed boss, gone. Just like that. And HR? I asked slowly. The other board member folded her hands. The director has been removed pending the audit. Several staff members are being questioned. There will be restructuring. She didn't say fired, but the meaning was sitting right there. Mitchell finally spoke, voice steady as ever. There's more. My pulse flickered. The board finds it unacceptable, he said, that an employee was assaulted, blamed, and removed from a company event without investigation. We believe you deserve not only reinstatement, but redress. What does that mean? I asked carefully. The chair slid a folder across the table. Inside, a reinstatement letter, an apology, formal, written, unambiguous, a compensation adjustment, and an offer, a promotion, a role one step above the one Daniel had held over me for years. I stared at it, then up at them. Why are you offering me this? The board member answered softly. Because you handled an impossible situation with more dignity than everyone above you. Mitchell's eyes held mine for a long second. Because you were honest, he added, when no one else was. Silence settled over the table, but it wasn't heavy this time. It felt clean. I closed the folder. I need a moment to think. Take all the time you need, the chair said. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing the kind of deep, slow breath that only comes when you've been carrying something too heavy for too long. The air tasted different, lighter, clearer. I didn't go far, just stood near the window, overlooking the parking lot. The same lot I'd walked through 3 days ago, feeling small and disposable. Now it looked different, or maybe I did. After a minute, the door opened softly behind me. Mitchell, he didn't speak at first, just stood beside me, looking out the same window. Finally, he said, "You don't owe them loyalty, not after the way you were treated." "I know," I replied, "but you also don't owe them bitterness," he added. "You get to choose what kind of man you become after something like this. Most people don't get that kind of clean moment." I nodded slowly. "It doesn't feel clean." "It will," he said, "when you stop letting other people define the narrative." I turned to him. "Why did you help me? Really?" He gave me the smallest smile, the only one I'd seen him show. "Because I've been doing this a long time," he said, "and men like you are the ones companies lose when no one pays attention. I don't like losing good men." He straightened his cuffs. "What you do next is yours. Promotion, transfer, or you walk away with a clean name and a better offer somewhere else." Somewhere deep in my chest, something settled, like a weight finally clicking into place where it belonged. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded once. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You told the truth. I just cleared the room so people could hear it." He walked back inside. I stayed another minute, watching cars move through the lot in slow arcs, people heading to lunch, lives continuing. Everything looked painfully normal, but something in me had finally stopped shaking. When I returned to the conference room, I sat down, opened the folder again, and signed where they'd marked. Not out of gratitude, out of clarity. When everything was finished, the board chair stood to shake my hand. "Welcome back, Mr. Gray," he said. Mitchell added more quietly, "You earned this." I left the building without looking over my shoulder. No whispers, no stares, just the click of my shoes on tile and the steady beat of my own pulse, even controlled. Outside, the air smelled like concrete after rain, sharp, clean. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. We heard what happened. "Mom is furious. Please call me. Daniel." I looked at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite, out of peace. Some endings don't need a dramatic door slam. Some endings are just quiet, like setting something down that was heavy for too long. I got in my car, started the engine, and let myself breathe the way you breathe when the world finally stops pressing its thumb on your throat. And for the first time since that slap rang through the restaurant, I felt steady, untangled, mine again.